translation. Of course, book 6 is the heart of the book, literally, right? And book 6 will be for us the journey into the underworld with Sybil, the Elysian fields with Anchises, and of course the great history of Rome given. Let's just jump into, I'll only give you a few lines of this, and again, I'm fighting the temptation to read way more than I probably should. Let's go to Charon. That's a fun one. Charon stands who rules the dreary coast, a sordid god. Down from his hoary chin, a length of beard descends, uncombed, unclean. His eyes like hollow furnaces on fire, a girdle foul with grease binds his obscene attire. He spreads his canvas with his pulley steers, the frights of flitting ghosts in his thin bottom bears. He looked in years, yet in his years were seen a youthful vigor and autumnal green. An airy crowd came rushing where he stood, which filled the margin of the fatal blood. By the way, this will be the translation that Keats will know so well. Husbands and wives, boys and unmarried maids, and mighty heroes, more majestic shades, and youths entombed before their father's eyes, with hollow groans and shrieks and feeble cries, thick as the leaves in autumn strew the woods, or fowls by wintry forest forsake the floods. The leaves of Vallombrosa from Milton's Paradise Lost come to mind here. And wing their hasty flight to happier lands. Such and so thick the shivering army stands and press for passage with extended hands. You can literally see them reaching out, begging to be in the boat with Charon. Now these, now those, the surely boatman bore. The rest he drove to distance from the shore. The hero, Aeneas, who beheld with wondering eyes the tumult mixed with shrieks, laments, and cries, asked of his guide what the rude concourse meant. Why to the shore the thronged people bent? What forms of law among the ghosts were used? Why some were ferried o'er, and some refused. We then will have, just a few lines later, the description of Dido in the underworld. Not far from these Phoenician, Dido stood, fresh from her wound, her bosom bathed in blood, whom, when the Trojan hero hardly knew, obscure in shades, and with a doubtful view, doubtful is he who sees through dusky night, or thinks he sees the moon's uncertain light. With tears he first approached the sullen shade, and as his love inspired him, thus he said, "Unhappy queen, then is the common breath of rumor true in your reported death, and I, alas, the cause? By heaven I vow, and all the powers that rule the realms below, unwilling I forsook your friendly state, commanded by the gods and forced by fate, those gods, that fate, whose unresisted might have sent me to these regions void of light, through the vast empire of eternal night. Nor dared I to presume that, pressed with grief, my flight would urge you to this dire relief. Stay your steps and listen to my vows. 'Tis the last interview that fate allows." In vain he thus attempts her mind to move with tears and prayers and late repenting love. Disdainfully she looked, then turning round, and what he says and swears regards no more than the deaf rocks when the loud billows roar, but whirled away to shun his hateful sight, hid in the forest and the shades of night. Truly beautiful poetry, and this translation of Dryden will have prodigious influence, especially on many of those romantic poets. I mentioned Keats just a few moments ago. I'll give you a couple of lines of Anchises with Aeneas, his boy. Their names, their fates, their conduct and their care in peaceful sentence and successful war. He, when Aeneas on the plain appears, meets him with open arms and falling tears. "Welcome," he said, "the gods' undoubted race. Oh, long expected to my dear embrace. Once more 'tis given me to behold your face. The love and pious duty which you pay have passed the perils of so hard a way. 'Tis true, computing times, I now believe the happy day approached, nor are my hopes deceived. What length of lands, what oceans have you passed, what storms sustained, and on what shores be cast? How have I feared your fate, but feared it most when love assailed you on the Libyan coast." The father speaking. And then a few lines later, "Now," he says, "fix your sight and stand intent to see your Roman race and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next behold the youth of firm divine, Caesar himself exalted in his line, Augustus promised oft and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold, the famed golden age. And then finally, but Rome, the last comments, these are the famous lines, obviously, of Anchises to his boy. But Rome, 'tis thine alone with awful sway, to rule mankind and make the world obey, disposing peace and war by that own majestic way, to tame the proud, the fettered slave to free. These are imperial arts, and worthy thee. Notice that worthy thee. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful poetry. All right, let's move on quickly now to Book 7. Of course, Aeneas to Italy and the Latians, the promises of Lavina, and of course the problem that Lavina has already been promised to Turnus. And then finally, the list of Turnus's allies is the way that we will end Book 7, kind of like, as we said, Iliad 2 and the catalog of the ships. Here, I'm only gonna jump in just for a couple of lines for the rest of our time now studying this. You have Alecto coming in as the Fury into the breast of Amata. Amata's breast the Fury thus invades, and fires with rage amid the Sylvan shades. Then, when she found her venom spread so far, the royal house embroiled in civil war, raised on her dusky wings, she cleaves the sides and seeks the palace where young Turnus lies. The next set of lines, just a few lines later, and how the mighty labor is begun. Ye muses, open all your Halcyon. Sing you the chiefs that swayed the Ausonian land, their arms and armies under their command. What warriors in our ancient clime were bred, what soldiers followed, and what heroes led. For well you know and can record alone what fame to future times conveys, but darkly down. And then the final lines at the very end, you'll have Camelia, the great warrioress. We're told, but last the Vulcan's fair Camelia came, and led her warlike troops, a warrior dame, unbred to spinning in the loom unskilled. She chose the nobler Pallas of the field. Mixed with the first, the fierce Virgo fought, sustained the toils of arms and danger sought, outstripped the winds in speed upon the plain, flew o'er the fields, nor hurt the bearded grain. She swept the seas, and as she skimmed along, her flying feet unbathed on billows hung. Men, boys, and women, stupid with surprise, where'er she passes, fix their wondering eyes. Longing they look, and gaping at the sight, devour her oar and oar with vast delight. Her purple habit sits with such a grace on her smooth shoulders, and so suits her face. Her head with ringlets of her hair is crowned, and in a golden caul the corals are bound. She shakes her myrtle javelin, and behind her Lycian quiver dances in the wind. Quite lovely poetry. Book 8, of course, Aeneas with at Palladium, which will be future Rome, with Evander, of course, and his son Pallas in Book 8. We have, of course, Venus speaking with Vulcan, and then the creation of Aeneas' shield as well. I'll only do one set of lines here. Pallas's first words when he sees Aeneas and the lads arriving. But when they saw the ships that stemmed the flood and glittered through the covert of the wood, they rose with fear and left the unfinished feast, till dauntless Pallas reassured the rest to pay the rites. Himself without delay a javelin seized, and singly took his way, then gained a rising ground and called from far, Resolve me, strangers, whence and what you are, your business here, and bring you peace or war. High on the stern Aeneas took his stand, and held a branch of olive in his hand, while thus he spoke. Beautiful imagery. Book 9, of course, we have the Nicias and Aurelius story. Ascanius is first killed. We have Turnus's Aristeas, we use that term. And of course, in the end, swimming the Tiber to escape. I'll just give you a few lines that are some of my favorite lines of this translation here. This is just at the very beginning. Amazed to find a dastard race that ran behind the ramparts and the battle shun, he rides around the camp with rolling eyes, as Turnus, right? And stops at every post and every passage tries. So roams the nightly wolf about the fold, wet with the descending showers and stiff with cold. He howls for hunger and he grins for pain. His gnashing teeth are exercised in vain, and impotent of rage finds no way in his distended paws to grasp the prey. Dryden, true genius as he translates this beautiful poetry, but his translation is remarkable. The exchange between Nisus and Euryalus is as well quite remarkable. Euryalus will hear him say, we'll hear Nisus say, "For fame is recompense enough for me. Methinks beneath yon hill I have espied a way that safety will my passage guide." And then Euryalus stood listening while he spoke, with love of praise and noble envy struck. Then to his ardent friend exposed his mind. "All this alone and leaving me behind, am I unworthy, Nicias, to be joined? Thinkest thou I can my share of glory yield, or send thee unassisted to the field? Not so, my father taught my childhood arms, born in a siege and bred among alarms. Nor is my youth unworthy of my friend, nor of the heaven-born hero I attend. The thing called life with ease I can disclaim, and think it's oversold to purchase fame." Wow, beautiful. Finally, I'll read one more set of lines that are quite lovely here. "O happy friends, for if my verse can give immortal life, your fame shall ever live." This is obviously at the end of the death of the two heroes. "O happy friends, for if my verse can give immortal life, your fame shall ever live, fixed as the Capitol's foundation lies, and spread where'er the Roman eagle flies." Book 10, of course, the gods' council. Jove will let fate decide, of course. Pallas is Aristeia, and then ultimately his death to Turnus. Turnus will, of course, put on the buckler that will ultimately decide his fate. And, of course, Aeneas' tremendous rage at the entire thing. I'll only read a single set of lines from Book 10, but I think they're quite lovely ones as well. So let me do that for you really quickly. "In an ill hour insulting Turnus tore those golden spoils," as after he's killed Pallas, "and in a worse he wore. O mortals, blind in fate, who never know to bear high fortune or endure the low, the time shall come when Turnus, but in vain, shall wish untouched the trophies of the slain, shall wish the fatal belt were far away, and curse the dire remembrance of the day." Well, we obviously know how that one shakes down. Book 11, of course, the funeral pyres on both sides. Diomedes rejects returning to fight for Turnus, and of course Camilia's Aristeia, and finally death by arrows. I'll read a single line as well here from this one. This is now Father Evander with Pallas, his son. One of the most heartrending set of lines, obviously, a father losing obviously everything when he lost his son. Evander, of course, forgetful of his state, he runs along with a disordered pace and cleaves the throng, falls on the corpse, and groaning there he lies with silent grief, but speaks but at his eyes. Short sighs and sobs succeed, till sorrow breaks a passage, and at once he weeps and speaks. "O Pallas, thou hast failed thy plighted word, to fight with caution, not to tempt the sword. I warned thee, but in vain, for well I knew what perils youthful ardor would pursue. That boiling blood would carry thee too far, young as thou wert, in dangers raw to war. O cursed essay of arms, disastrous doom, prelude of bloody fields and fights to come, hard elements of unauspicious war, vain vows to heaven, and unavailing care." The attempt, of course, to try to translate out of the Latin the anguish, I think Dryden has done a masterful job. Book 12, of course, we have the peace that's made and then ultimately broken, of course, the slaughter that will ensue. Aeneas is hurt, but of course healed by Venus, his mother. We have the famous scales of Job, and we realize it's over. Juno, of course, ultimately will decide that it's okay, but no, they're not going to be called Trojans, they're going to be called Latians or Latins. The final fight, of course, between Aeneas and Turnus is the way this poem will end. He almost lets him off, and then he's going to jack him because of Pallas's belt. And the question, obviously, is Aeneas a hero for killing the unarmed and the surrendering Turnus? Let's just jump into, I'll only give you a few of these. Again, I'm fighting the temptation to read more of this than I normally would. What God can tell? What numbers can display the various labors of that fateful day? What chiefs and champions fell on either side, in combat slain, or by what deaths they died, whom the Trojan hero killed, who shared the fame and fortune of the field. That's exclamation point, by the way. Jove, couldst thou view and not avert thy sight two jarring nations joined in cruel fight, whom leagues of lasting love so shortly shall unite? So much of these lines, of course, often read any time peoples began the process of serious fighting. Finally, the final lines. I mean, it's worth our time to do it. So let's read it. The hero. Final lines of this translation. The hero measured first with narrow view the destined mark, rising as he threw, with its full swing the fatal weapon flew. Not with less rage the rattling thunder falls, or stones from battering engines break the walls. Swift as a whirlwind from an arm so strong, the lance drove on and bore the death along. Naught could his sevenfold shield the prince avail, nor aught beneath his arms the coat of mail. It pierced through all, and with a grisly wound transfixed his thigh, and doubled him to the ground with groans. The Latians rend the vaulted sky, woods, hills, and valleys, to the voice reply. Now, low on earth, the lofty chief is laid, with eyes cast upward, and with arms displayed, and recreant thus to the proud victor prayed. I know my death deserved, nor hope to live. Use what the gods in thy good fortune give. Yet think, oh think, if mercy may be shown. Thou hast a father once, and hast a son. Pity my sire, now sinking to the grave, and for Anchises' sake, old Donna save. Or, if thy vowed revenge pursue my death, give to my friends my body void of breath. The Latian chiefs have seen me beg my life. Thine is the conquest, thine the royal wife. Against the yielded man, 'tis mean ignoble strife. And then, in deep suspense, the Trojan seemed to stand, and just prepared to strike, repressed his hand. He rolled his eyes, and every moment felt his manly soul with more compassion melt, when, casting down a casual glance, he spied the golden belt that glittered on his side, the fatal spoils which haughty Turnus tore from dying Pallas, and in triumph bore. Then, roused anew to wrath, he loudly cries. Flames, while he spoke, came flashing from his eyes. Traitor, dost thou to grace pretend, glad as thou art in trophies of my friend? To his sad soul a grateful offering go. 'Tis Pallas gives this deadly blow. He raised his arm aloft, and at the word, deep in his bosom drove the shining sword. The streaming blood disdained his arms around, and the disdainful soul came rushing through the wound. Well, this is amazing poetry, and again, the challenge is in the end to, and by the way, there was a postscript to the reader as well. Dryden will say right at the very end, he says, what Virgil wrote in the vigor of his youth and plenty and at ease, I have undertaken to translate in my declining years, struggling with wants, oppressed with sickness, curbed in my genius, liable to be misconstrued in all I write, and my judges, if they are not very equitable, already prejudiced against me by the lying character which has been given them of my morals. So Dryden will try to give one last word about why it's so important that he did this project in the first place. Well, my hope is that, again, you will go back to Virgil's Aeneid again and again. Certainly the Dryden translation, so influential in the history of English poetry and, of course, American poetry. Again, I challenge you, if you haven't watched our lectures and paid attention to the earlier lectures in the Fingal's translation, go back and compare the two. This is obviously what we call 3A activity, right? When we take a look at different ways to translate this text. Well, we now turn to volume number 14. This one will be Cervantes' Don Quixote. We're only going to be working with part 1 in the Harvard Classics, but I'm very excited to share that story with you as well. A story of a different kind of hero, we might say. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation.